Chapter 7 and 8 is what we had on the docket for this week's reading. And I just wanted to check in with the folks on the call. How did it go? What'd you think?
A little bit overwhelming, but I think very insightful at the same time, for me at least.
Yeah, I agree with a little overwhelming.
Chapter 7 was a really long chapter, but they gave us 8 was a pretty short chapter. And I know we're not really talking about just the reading. It's the concepts and what you need to go bite off at this stage in the process. Did anyone start on putting the buckets together?
Well, I started out pretty small. I mean, sort of keeping in context the book around start little and kind of figure out what works and iterate from there. So I basically, like I mentioned to you the other day, I started with my inbox and Outlook, and I created 4 simple buckets that were action needed, that was more critical, to read and take action, where I'm actually going to have to go through a document or some sort of collateral and take action. Read only, and then waiting on others. And I think the waiting on others list has been a very important one for me, because I have a lot of projects right now that I have with consultants or employees or, et cetera, where I'm constantly quarterbacking tasks that have to occur somewhere else. So to me, doing that, I think, was one of the biggest ahas around how I can actually put it to work for myself.
Right. And I think, that's a really good one. I've seen a lot of benefit from that myself, in that when you're waiting for somebody else to take action, it's obviously not your to-do, it's theirs. But it's almost easier to forget about those things because it's really not your action. You're waiting for someone. So it's a great reminder and a way to keep track of what's out there, especially when you're interacting with people all over the country or the company, as you are, Dave. Let's take a look here. I wanted to go through and cover what's in the planner bucket really quickly here. Put some documents out here. There's an element for the weekly review, or 2 of them actually, a description and then a handout. And I'll show you what I use, and it's basically the points that are here. And then there are 3 videos that I'll add to our YouTube channel that are around that weekly review, and then a couple of examples that you could walk through. Okay, so in Chapter 7, these are the buckets that David Allen describes. So a project list, your support materials, your calendar, action lists, and those are the categories of actions that he recommends. And Dave, you mentioned some of those. The waiting for, reference material, and then someday maybe. And I want to point out too that you have the flexibility in this, as we've talked about all the way through, to design what's going to work best for you. And I think that's part of why it's somewhat ambiguous in the book about what you should go do. He doesn't clearly define a process. It's more of a strategy, because I think if he gave you a clear process, everyone would try to implement exactly what he gave you, and it probably wouldn't fit everyone. So that's where this is a little bit undefined, left for you to do, where I think that's where some folks struggle with, well, where do I put that? So I wanted to give the example of how I have these things organized for me and how it makes sense for me. So first of all, I'll start with what I have on my phone. And I use the iPhone Reminders app. And if you're seeing my screen, you'll see those are the buckets that I carry with me. And the reason why they're on my phone is that they're completely portable this way. So if I'm at home, that first bucket, the reminders, that's my portable inbox. So if I have a thought, or if I'm driving and I ask Siri to take a note, everything goes in that reminders list. And then when I'm sitting at my workstation here in the office, I process that inbox just like I would any other, the physical inbox or my email inbox. And I either move it to one of the other categories here, or I move it to my project list, or a task, or a calendar entry, or one of the other buckets is where it ends up going. Or maybe it's just a thought and I realize there's no action, and then I delete it, just like you would process anything else on your workflow. Errands are things that I have to do when I'm either somewhere between home or work, as you might imagine. Home are just that. Groceries is an obvious list. The Berry agenda there, that's if there are things that come up between my meetings with my boss, I'll take notes, and when we sit down, I've got it captured and I'm ready to talk to him. Or if he just happens to walk in my office and ask me if I've got anything going on, I have a nice compact list on my phone. No matter where I am, I'm ready to talk to Barry. And then truck projects, that's ideas that I've had about I've got an old pickup truck that I'm working on. Those are things that I want to explore further. So it's something of a someday maybe list, but because I work on it at home or maybe when I'm in an auto parts store, I wanted it to be portable. So let me show you a couple examples of those lists blown out real quick. So there's my errands, things that I need to go do, and then the agenda items I had for Barry. So again, concise, actionable, things that are going to spark the discussion that I need to have.
Hey, Scott, hang on those reminders there. Do you typically just get in the habit of looking at that every day, or do you put the pop up, the time notifications?
It depends. Some of them, I'll give you an example. Like this one, there was a tester that I needed. It was for automotive tester that when I leave work, I wanted it to pop up on my phone so that as I'm driving home, I'll go by the auto parts store and go look for that. To process my inbox, the reminders here, I actually have a reminder on my calendar right here. iPhone reminders, process your mobile inbox. So if Monday when I come in, I'll do anything I've collected over the weekend. And I typically look at that each morning when I come into the office. That way, again, I'm clearing those things that I had captured, and then they go in. And another thing that I do is if I'm going to bed at night and I'm having trouble getting to sleep, I'll go through that mind sweep, and anything I have in my mind, I'll put into my reminders on my phone so that I get it out of my head. So for my weekly review, I just wanted to show you I do have that. It's just a list of the clear, get current, get creative items that are in the book. And that's in the job aid that's in the bucket on the planner. I have my project list, which the first part of this is just a reminder of that's the 5 stages of project planning. And then down here, I really just have a bullet point on each project, where we are, and if I have any, what's the next action. And I don't have a lot here, but it's really just, this is my weekly, I want to go through this and think about all the open projects I have, where we are, and is there anything I can do in the week ahead to move them forward. And then the individual actions that are associated with these exist as tasks in my Outlook or as calendar entries in my Outlook calendar. So the other thing that I do here, I do use categories, the colors here. So if I wanted to look at everything that's part of my GTD, I actually added categories here to this list. So now when I click in the search box, I can choose one of my categories and say, okay, what are my GTD items? And I've got all of those to pull up. So you could use that feature in Outlook if you choose to use Outlook as your tool to put those things together so that you can look at the items that are associated with a certain context all at one time. I also have my someday maybe list here and a mind sweep list. And I have some other someday maybe elements that I keep in my no date. So things like trips I want to go on, home improvement lists, other things that I kind of keep in the back of my mind that I want to work on at some point but aren't current projects. So that honestly in a nutshell is those are my buckets. Those are the places that once I put everything in the inbox, where I process them to, and that becomes my trusted system. So the weekly review itself in the book, you hear it described as an hour to 2 hours. That time is probably appropriate in the beginning. Maybe the first couple of months that you do this, you'll have that kind of time commitment. But for me now, I'm in such a rhythm with this, it's rarely more than a half an hour. So if you think about the time that we spend on this call each week during the book club, it's almost enough time to do your weekly review. So after this ends in a couple of weeks, maybe that's the time you carve out to carry it forward.
Well, like I mentioned to you yesterday, I mean, the one thing that I have realized this week is just by keeping my inbox clear and allowing those lists to be where I put things to live, it has reduced what I did not even realize was an unconscious element of anxiety that I was carrying around trying to remember things or worried that I would overlook something. That was a huge deal for me. I will share one example of a pitfall, though. Throughout this whole process, find a way that I can put less time into email. And I think I had shared with you the amount of hours that I did in my time study where I saw I was spending on email were pretty ridiculous. And so what I kind of committed to myself was, hey, look, I'll use email, I'll put it on these lists, but I'm only going to check email a couple of times a day now so that I can actually stay focused on what I need to do. Well, the problem with that is if there are other people, either who you're working with on projects, your boss, your staff, whatever, who are not sort of kind of having that same idea that you use email that way, you can miss things like I did yesterday. In fact, the call that I mentioned to you when I had to leave and come back up to your desk, there was an email that went out that said we were going to push that out. I didn't see it because I had not checked my email in between the time that I had loaded up my list and then come back to check it at my next interval. So I think the aha to me was, if you're going to operate that way, you need to make sure that all the people who you're working with on projects understand that like a text message may be a better way to get in touch with you, an urgent thing, rather than an email. So I think platform of communication becomes something else.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think I don't know that you can completely walk away from things for, okay, I'm only going to check my email at these times of the day. You can get into a rhythm of doing that, but like you just mentioned, things are going to pop up that are more immediate. But I think also most people realize that if you're going to give someone really short notice, a phone call is probably the way to go. The perfect example of that, Dave, is yesterday. You called me and said, hey, could I come down to your office for a quick meeting, impromptu, with the guys from StrategyWise? That we didn't plan that. I wasn't going to be a part of it, but you wanted to pull me in a kind of an urgent situation or just an urgent discussion, and I was able to do that. But what you didn't count on an email, you just called me. So I think that would be a general expectation I would have of most folks, is that they would, when it's a really tight window, they should probably reach out to you in some way other than just hoping you check your email. Because you could be on the road, you could be in an airplane, you may not have any access to email. So I wouldn't be as concerned about that. I know it is a risk and you have to weigh it, but I don't want you to be obsessive about having to constantly read your email all day. And just as a tip, the way I do mine, I just before this call had cleared my inbox, so I only have one email that's come in since. I can glance at that to see that maybe that's not anything I need to jump on right now. And if I am working on something else, I'm not going to go distract myself and come back to this and start processing my inbox again until there's an appropriate time. Like middle of the day, let's say I've just finished something, I'm ready to go work on the next thing. But before I do, I want to clear my mind of these potentially hanging issues or other urgent things that may have come up. So you go and process your inbox quickly, move them to the appropriate buckets, do your 2-minute actions, and then you're clear again. And if something did come up in that needs to be done right now, you had an opportunity to review it and act on it. If there wasn't, now you're free. You've cleared your mind of those possible commitments, and you can focus, be present on whatever that next thing is you're working on. So I think really using the process and again, trusting the system. And David Allen talks about this a lot if you listen to the podcasts or the videos that I put out there for you. You guys are still very early in this process, and you probably don't yet trust your system. And what you just said a moment ago, Dave, is evidence of that, is that you're still worried about what happens when, because you just haven't done it enough to really see how it's going to work for you. I also wanted to offer, just if we could have one more minute, out in the planner site, there's these maximize your productivity with Outlook, and if anyone has looked at those, there's some videos there. But I wanted to show you one thing that you can do that I think is really valuable when it comes to using GTD. And one of the things David Allen talks about is that you need to make your system easy to use, because it'll be more likely that you'll actually do it if it's that way. So this email I have from Dolly Sherman, I can preview this and read it. And let's say I know right now exactly what I need to do. Let's say I want to move this to my read list. Now I have a folder right here, but I also would want to put a category on it and a follow-up flag. But what I've done is I've created a quick step in Outlook and I've got some others here, where I can highlight the email and then click this button, and it moves it for me to that folder, categorizes it, does everything I need to do in one quick step. So my processing of that email was as quick and easy as understanding what it was and moving it to the appropriate bucket with a quick step. So again, if you're going to use Outlook to process part of your information and your buckets, this is a great tool, quick steps, and again, in those videos it explains how to do it.